we're on the floor again today, and next to me is my 2021 F3 here. This is the one I crammed the F5 motors into, and we're going to address an issue that has plagued me ever since I put these motors in, and that is these motors are very loud. And before I put them on the chair, I really should have taken them apart and cleaned the brush housings and everything and made sure that was all good. But the plan is today, we're going to clean the brush housings and then pay some attention to the motor commutators. AKA, we're probably gonna sand them down and polish them a little bit and then check out the brushes and make sure they're good to go. I did kind of blow out the dust from one of the motors, and I think that's the one that's significantly quieter. So anyways, I've been putting this off for a while because it's kind of an inordinate amount of work and I didn't really want to get on the floor. I do believe we have everything here that we need for tools, but let me show you what it sounds like. This side here is the noisiest one. And I mean, realistically, as far as brush DC motors go, that's not bad. But I just want to see if we can clean them up, polish the commutators with some, like, what did I get? I hate even touching this stuff with my bare hands, but we've got 400 grit, then we have 1000 grit, and then we have 2500. And we're gonna see if we can get those commutators nice and mirror-like finished and go from there. Anyways, you've seen me take this apart a billion times. Like I said, I really don't want to pull the motors off, but I might have to. My thought was maybe I could snake this brake off and then get the super long bolts out that hold it together and slide this back, but we don't have a lot of clearance here, and even getting these brake bolts off are gonna be annoying. All I have to do is pull these 4 bolts and the whole thing will come off. And I don't have to worry about the wiring. There's enough slack down here to just lay it on the floor, so I think we're just gonna do that. Let's pop these loose and see what happens. Oh, do I have to take off? Yeah, I have to take off this thing too because it blocks some of the bolts. We'll get our anti-tipper off of here. All right. 7 bolts. We have to take off 7 bolts to get these apart. Well, it looks like we did pick up a little bit of hair on the motor output shaft. That's always a thing. Hey, all right. There we go. You can see we have a motor. Here's the spacers that I use so this thing would fit on here. Looks like, oh, our shocks are leaking. Might be time for new C500 shocks. So you can see we've got this little dripping right here. And if we look up here at this shock absorber, you can see, yeah, we've got oil coming out of there. Oh yeah, look at that. That's pretty bad. All right, well, at least it's not the motors and it's not anything that's like, you know, super critical. But I'm gonna have to find another set of these things now. They're getting harder and harder to find on eBay. That sucks. Actually, how long have these been on here? I did a video when I put them on. I'll have to look that up and put it on the screen here. See how many years we've been rocking these shock absorbers. I wonder if they're rebuildable. Whatever. All right, motor. So we need to, let's see what's the best way to deal with this. We need to get our brake housing off of here, our brakes off of here. Then once we get these off, we can access the super long bolts that hold the 2 halves of the motor together, and we can get down into the commutator area. Okay, so our bracket's kind of intact. Let me clip this one zip tie here. I think the next prudent thing to do would be remove the brushes. You know, I'm going to mark these as to which way is forward. I'm just going to put a little dot on the front of these. So that's going to be the front of the motor, because these wear at sort of an angle. And while even taking these out and putting them back in will result in more noise, I'd like to avoid having to reseat these brushes. Yeah, this motor definitely is not the one that I cleaned. far as wear level goes, I'd say these things are easily 50-60% remaining. Oh, we have a lot of hair around this output shaft. I'll have to remember to clean that when we put this all back together. Ew, go away. New favorite tool, by the way. It's a little quarter drive ratchet that accepts 1/4 inch bits. Super handy for tight areas. And we've got, oh, there's nuts. 2 of them instead of bolts. So what do you reckon, 8mm? Booyah, first try. Which, if these are studs, that actually is going to help out quite a bit. Because usually the most difficult part of these is, so what we're doing right now is taking out these long screws that go from here all the way down to here. And the most difficult part is putting those back in, because you have to push them through this hole and keep this all lined up. Speaking of which, let's mark this as well. But trying to get those lined up with the holes on the other end is super annoying. But if these are studs, that's going to make this so much easier. Hang on. And then that's just going to come off. They are. Okay, nice work, permobil. I don't know if you're still doing this on your 4-pole 5 series motors, but I'm loving it. It looks like our little rubber thing here is broken, but whatever. Now, oh wait, okay, we don't have to pull that off. Now, I can pop this out. Yeah, see, we got studs. Oh boy, is it dirty in here. Yeah, and, oh, that's like a, what are those things you scrub your laundry on the river? Like a washboard. Okay, so we can definitely make this quieter. All right, we just need to kind of get this cleaned up. Let me get our spring washer off here before I lose it. Will that come off, or is it captive? It's captive, even better. All right. Let me change my gloves. I'm going to show you down inside here. And actually, we may almost even need to take this outside and clean it. Some of that dust and dirt has definitely made its way down the motor housing, so I'm going to have to take this outside and blow it off. But check this out. We got quite a bit of integrated filth down in here. Hopefully this stays in focus. It's hard to tell with this camera, but you can see there. I mean, I've seen ones that are a lot worse, but just in case you're wondering, the brushes go down through these holes right here, and then those pop out here and press up against the commutator, and that's how you get your electrical connection. So like that. This I'm not going to remove from the chair. I'm just going to use some canned air. I'm sorry. You know what the kids do with this stuff. Why is the artwork some computer that's clearly been... Look at the eyes. It looks like they've been improperly using this. Anyways, here's the red hot metal in your eye. Oh boy. I'm going to clean the camera lens now. Let's... Oh, this is bad. So, I don't know if these have ever been cleaned. Do I have a vacuum? See, I did all this hoping I wouldn't have to get up off the floor, but I'm clearly going to. Yeah, I'll be right back. I'm going to grab a vacuum cleaner and some other stuff, and rather not have all this blowing around in here. I'll be back. It's entirely possible, and I'm going to immediately regret this. All right, here goes nothing. Yeah, that badly needed cleaning. Yeah, there's a ton of metallic dust down in here. Okay, that was a whole thing, but I'm actually very glad we did that. Actually, this stator actually looks pretty decent. Our bearing down here feels okay. Doesn't seem to be any in-play in it. It probably wouldn't hurt to oil that just a little bit. But yeah, I'm glad we took this apart, because there was a lot of that carbon dust down inside here. And I mean, I'm sure these are fine. I just prefer to see when all of the winding connections are potted in epoxy. It makes me feel a little bit better, but I really liked the studs on this. It makes it so much easier to deal with as far as like putting it back together and everything. But let me grab some more of these wipes. We're just gonna manually wipe down some of the surfaces in here that our blower didn't get completely clean. Yeah, this looks really bad if you've never done this before, but this is just the nature of brushed DC motors, especially when your brush housings aren't sealed, and they almost never are. You just get all that stuff everywhere, and carbon is conductive, so when it builds up, you start having problems. I can very much feel the edge of every one of these, and also we've got carbon on here, so what I'm going to do is use the sandpaper. We're going to clean this up, and then we're going to polish it and hopefully get the whole thing super shiny. With the blue background behind it, if you look at this very top edge right here, you can see it's ever so slightly concave. And that happens after, you know, a lot of use. I think these motors have over a couple thousand miles on them, maybe. I'm very happy that we took this outside and cleaned it out. I'm going to finish wiping this up. I'm going to use probably just a couple of drops of 3-in-1 down in here, just to give that bearing some good vibes. Probably the same with this one up here, because this is right next to where all that carbon dust is generated. You don't want to put any oil on these, and you certainly don't want oil dripping around in here, because that'll combine with the carbon dust and make a paste. That's actually what happens when your grease seals fail in these things, is you start getting some of the lubricant from in here down inside, and it starts mixing with all that dust, and it makes this crazy corrosive, mechanically abrasive paste that gets all over everything, and that's when you're not going to have a good time. Whoops. Then this guy, being a 4-pole motor, you can see we have 4 permanent magnets down inside there, and those are roughly just epoxied to the side of this housing. So we'll just kind of wipe this out a little bit. And looking down in there, I don't really see any evidence of the rotor contacting the magnets. It's actually, yeah, most of that blew out pretty well. It's all about the magnets, bro. Okay, actually, I think we'll just move on to the sanding next. Oh, I was gonna grab some scissors, but I didn't. So I bought several grits. We've got 400 grit, 1000 grit, and then 2500, which is probably excessive. 400 I'm just gonna use to kind of lightly knock stuff down. Best part is, when we're done with all this, we get to take apart the other side of the chair and do it all over again. Anyways, I'm gonna mess with this, I'll be back. Using knockoff brand batteries on this camera is probably not the best idea. One of them just died with no warning and may have corrupted some files, but we'll see. Anyways, after a not insignificant amount of time later, we have cleaned up this commutator a bit. Now, there are a few issues here that here I'm not able to 100% take care of. We do have a fairly substantial lip right here on the top where the brushes have been wearing. It'd be kind of like, you know, on brake drums or discs, you have that little lip on the edge there. I don't have a motor lathe, which was really just a regular lathe with some special fixturing. But as a result, I wasn't able to clean off all the black marks right down here. And I can't even tell if this camera is doing this justice or not. But I went ahead and sanded all the way down to the 2500 grit, and this now is smooth as glass. The very rough, dried out skin on my hands doesn't even catch these edges. So I think it's about as good as we can reasonably do. These motors are not new, and honestly, without turning this down, and even if you did that, that ridge is just too much for sandpaper to deal with. But we got it nice and cleaned up. It's much smoother than it was. And yeah, I think that should be good. Like I was saying, when I first got the motors for this chair, I got super excited and wanted to just see if they would fit on an F3. And I only took off the dust covers on the brush housings on one side and blew a little bit of air down in that area. And this one I didn't touch at all. So, yeah, everything looks to be in pretty good shape here. This was so rough before. Now it's just like, I mean, look, at RPM I can put my finger on there and it's fine. Gotta clean up these brushes too. Yeah, these are probably about 50%. 50% life, 50% used? I don't know, however you want to say that. 50% is a good number. Pick your denominator. All right, I'm gonna put it all back together on this side. Then I'll be back for a noise test. Simply because YouTube, I feel compelled to mention, when I say I'm going to oil these bearings, this is some 3-in-1 oil. And this is how I applied it. This is just a ink refill syringe. It's not sharp on the end. But we're talking a very, very small amount of oil, where you use something like this to dose it in there. Yeah, do not slather this in oil. You will have problems, guaranteed. The smallest amount you can possibly think is all you need. I kind of feel like Columbo here sometimes, or I'm turning around and walking out of the room and I'm like, oh wait, one more thing. Another thing I did, I'm gonna liken this to putting thermal paste on computer processors, because the way people do this varies wildly and incites lots of arguments, but I have knocked down the very sharp edges on the edge of these brushes and also refaced them very, very lightly to get rid of the ridges that were on here. There is going to be a little bit of run-in required after doing all of this, and I'm just trying to aid in that. But after a while, as these things wear, you get kind of a sharp, folded over edge on these brushes, and you want to knock that down. And you can still, I think the light shows, you can still see some lines in there, but my goal is to get it smooth. My glove was catching on it when I started. And this being carbon, a little bit of sanding goes a long way. One more thing I didn't do that I certainly should have done. I marked the rear brush housing with the center part, but I did not mark down here. And there is a little bit of slack when you put these things back together because those bolts are just going between magnets. So there is kind of an art form to getting this clocked properly. You can feel it stops there and it stops there. So worst case scenario, what you can do is find the center point between them. And actually, I'm just realizing right now, there's some damage on this case right here. There's some scratches, and I can use those to line it up just about perfectly, which is right there. All right, cool. So I didn't mark it, but there were some scratches on here that worked in our favor. So anyways, all right, we have it back together. We have our bolts tensioned down. We got all the brushes back in. I probably should have checked the windings on the motors to make sure none of them are open, because if you have an open circuit on one of those 4 windings in there, that's also going to generate a lot of noise. But the chair was tracking perfectly straight, so I don't think that's the case. But anyways, let's power this hoopty on. Actually, here, before we do that, I'm going to spin it manually, see what it sounds like. I mean, still sounds like an electric motor. These are going to make noise. I'm just wondering if it's going to be any better or not. So, chair's powered on. Okay, so still about the same amount. Well, right now at this point, I can't tell if that's louder or not. I really should run these brushes in. Regardless of all that, I feel much better knowing that the inside of this is not full of dirt and crap anymore. Yeah. All right, this side here is the one that I cleaned. I think what I did was I just took a couple of the caps off and blew some air down in here. But is it overexposed? Probably. But you can see it's not nearly as bad down in here. But we're still gonna take this the rest of the way apart and clean everything up. Commutator on this side, it's actually a lot darker looking, and I can definitely feel the ridges on there. You can see on this side it's a little bit darker. Yeah, we are still concave a bit. And honestly, I don't know if breaking this in is going to make a big difference or not. These commutators are worn out enough that they should probably be replaced or completely machined down. But regardless, I still want to get this whole thing taken apart, get all the dust out of there. Come on, ice maker. That thing is basically silent except for every time I try to start talking. Anyways, our shock absorber is not leaking on this side, so that's kind of nice. You can see it's all shiny and clean there. But yeah, I'm gonna take this outside. We're gonna do the same treatment as before. I'm gonna mess around with the sandpaper on this. That's good. Yeah, I'm gonna mess around with the sandpaper on this and get that all cleaned up. I think you can see the amount of carbon that just spilled out of here. I'm using my nose to operate the zoom. So even though you simply pull the brush caps off and blow it around, try to blow the dust out, some of it gets forced deeper in here, and you know, this is sort of a maintenance thing that should probably be done at some point. I know there's some people that are like, oh, it's a wheelchair. What do you mean service it and maintenance and all that? I don't know. You tell me. Look at all this crap that's all over the ground. That's not that's not electrically conductive in a way that you want. Here we have the motor on the other side, which has been cleaned, and we put the housing back together. The brushes are not in there yet, but since it's quiet in here for the moment, I wanted to give you an idea of what the, we'll just call it electromagnetic flux sounds like. We got magnets, we got windings. I'm just gonna turn this. There's nothing touching anything else in here, no brushes. Take a listen. That is simply the sound of the magnetics and the windings interacting with each other. So these are never going to be completely silent. And when you get into electromagnetic interference or noise, there's other things you can do. As you can see here, we've got a choke, or what do they call these things? A ferrite. Yeah, like a ferrite choke basically on the input here, which helps a little bit when everything's powered up. But yeah, these are never going to be completely silent. We're always going to get a little bit of noise. While we're in here looking at stuff, you can see the commutator down inside there, and here is the back of the output shaft. As I turn this, let's see, can I get this angle right? There we go. I can turn this and see how when it stops, it kind of jiggles back and forth a little bit. That has to do with the coil and the permanent magnets interacting with each other. That's what you would call cogging in an electric motor, but you just get that little bit of a bounce. We're actually generating a fairly significant amount of energy here by turning this manually. Well, I guess technically kind of generating electricity. It's not going out because we don't have the brushes in, but interesting to note though, taking this apart, I was seeing how these cables, the strain relief on them or the protection is a little bit torn here. But looking inside, it wouldn't be that difficult. Here, I think I've got a picture. It wouldn't really be that difficult to desolder these connections or restake them on. So if we did need to repair this wiring, it's not completely out of the question. And on the permobiles at least, the brake wiring is separate. On some other motors, it goes inside on the end and then connects back up through here. But these are actually two separate connectors and two separate wires on the permobiles, which is kind of handy. Anyhow, I'm gonna get these brushes refaced and sanded, get it put back in there, and then see how much more noise we get. It's again, even if it makes noise, I'm gonna feel a lot better about knowing that the inside of these are clean, because after an extended period of time, all that crap builds up in there, and you can't tell me that that's okay. Like, it's gonna cause problems. Obviously our commutator's probably worn out beyond where it should realistically be used. And also I was noticing that these motors were not quite clocked properly when they were put together. So we're gonna have a little bit more, I won't say efficiency, but things will be a tiny bit better. And we're talking like quarters of a horsepower here, like when it comes to, you know, drag racing and stuff like that. Just doing little tiny things, but it's all stuff that makes me feel better, and I know I've laid eyes on it, and yeah. We've encountered the moment of truth. Well, maybe not. I forgot how tight the clearances are on these. Anyways, we're gonna turn this on, see what kind of noises it makes, and then we're gonna try and run in the brushes. That other motor is still significantly louder. They do certainly sound a lot happier, but so make sure our brake still works. Yeah, that sounds good. And yes, there's all the plumbing from this building goes through this wall and into my bedroom. Anyways, I'm getting extremely tired. I want to make all of this filth be on here. Then, yeah, something. Probably get some food. I'll be back. I'm over here in the corner because that thing is exceptionally loud. Actually, here, if I turn around, there we go. That's why you have directional microphones. Anyways, I've been slowly ramping the speed up on this thing. I started at a pretty low rate, going forward and backwards. I did notice an interesting thing though. After about 5 minutes or so, the joystick, well, the chair will throw an error because the joystick hasn't moved, and it'll stop. It just won't drive anymore. Now, I know that RNet, like Quickie for example, has this. I think it's set a lot shorter. I believe it's supposed to be a safety feature, where if the joystick is pinned, it'll eventually stop. But in this case, it literally goes like 5 minutes or more. So I don't know what the point of that is exactly. Maybe it thinks there's a control system fault because the joystick hasn't moved at all. Regardless, I'm gonna wait for it to air out again, then I will show you that on the screen, but it's making the process slightly annoying. And we've got the thing up on a jack, and I went ahead and put a couple of cans of beans under the casters, just in case something happens, because if that thing gets loose, not gonna have a good time. Like, that is so dangerous if that thing started flying around in here. We're gonna go in the other room and close the door. That's starting to make my head hurt. Anyways, this was just kind of an experiment to see if cleaning up the commutator and the brushes would have any effect on the motor noise. Electric motors are just kind of noisy in general, and these are older ones. I've spoken to a number of other people that have the same, you know, year range of 5 Series permobil chair, and they all say they're pretty noisy. They make about the same amount. And come to think of it, Magic Mobility also makes noise, but in their case, I think it's the straight cut gears and the inline motors that's responsible for most of the screeching on those. But again, I kind of like the sound of those as well. People can hear you coming and they get out of your way. So just kind of an experiment to see. I haven't run in brushes like this before, so I'm curious to see what this is gonna do, if anything. After doing all of this though, the chair is actually significantly quieter going in reverse than forward. And the longer I've had this thing running in reverse, the louder it's been getting. So my hope is that the angle and the cant of the brushes as you switch from forward to reverse changes. It'll get louder in reverse and quieter in forward. But I'm loosely basing that on nothing. So anyways, I'm gonna let this run for a while, and then I'll update you if anything interesting happens. Alrighty, it just shut down. Let's look at the error. We are getting JS static timeout, 1 Delta 05. So I don't know if this is gonna be an actual safety feature or not. And by the way, if you let go of the joystick, it doesn't do anything. You have to actually power cycle the chair. I'm thinking this has more to do with the control system, thinking there might be a problem. The chair is moving and there's zero change on this. Now I have attempted to kind of like wiggle it back and forth as it's going, and that doesn't seem to make a difference. It'll still throw the air, but very interesting. I've never actually encountered that. I've heard about it, but never seen it. All right, here we go. We've broken in the brushes. I'm sitting in the back corner and I've got it turned up all the way. Let's see how it behaves. Oh, that's faster than it was before. I can't hold the camera and drive in here and look at the speedometer. I don't even know if it would be different, but yeah, that's quite a bit more performant. It's still loud. Going backwards is quieter for some reason. Oh, yeah. Let's put this in the indoor mode and see how that does. Okay, so just going from the kitchen over to my desk. Oh yeah, it's still 100% as loud as it was, but backwards is quieter. All right, well, like I've already said 30,000 times, at least we know the inside of the motors are clean. By the way, the GoFundMe that was started by a viewer to get me a new editing computer has, well, it's gotten me a new editing computer. This is an M4 Mac Mini and miniature, yes. It is very small, but I got the little dock for it. There's a M.2 SSD down in there. This thing on top. I've got my Goodwill assortment of old school keyboards and mice and this awesome mouse pad. But yeah, this has been making editing so much better. So this is the first video that you're actually watching right now. The first one I've edited on it, and it's saving me ridiculous amounts of time. I've been doing all my editing on a 2014 MacBook Pro, and I'll spend half hour to 45 minutes every time I make a video just fighting with the thing because the software is out of date and it's not very fast and it locks up and all kinds of stuff. But so far, yeah, this is gonna make video editing so much easier for me. So anyways, thank you to all the people that donated to that. We actually have the thing here now and it's yielding results. I'm watching someone attempt to back into a parking space and they've now backed up 5 different times. There's no cars on either side. Anyways, we'll just pretend that didn't happen. We're gonna call that good. I think we learned something. The motors need to be cleaned. I think that's the, what does AI always say? The main takeaway. And the key points are do maintenance on your chair if you can. I think a lot of times the DMEs or the dealers or whatever they're called wherever you're at are just more likely to replace entire motors. But these are technically worn out, but they still work. I went down the street to get some food, and I did notice the chair had a little bit more power getting up some hills. Wasn't any faster necessarily, but we had more torque, and the sound is slowly getting quieter. So, jury's still out on that. I'm gonna get some sleep now because I've been rolling around on the floor all day. So anyways, hopefully you enjoyed whatever this was. Words are difficult sometimes, but we got it done. See ya. Thanks for watching. It's very simple. I used rubber bands.